Go for it.
Hi, we're back again. After a long absence for I guess the Christmas holidays, we were all celebrating, and I hope we weren't under the weather. I'm here today with Bob Menna. This is a new type of era story, because really it's not a story. We may have a story by bringing up how the business was and what the business is today. So that's the topic of today, of how things have changed and how everybody perceives it. And I'll try to give the agent's point of view, being an agent all my life, or the manager all my life. And Bob, who came up from the ranks, who was a model and a manager. I was a model for a little while also, but in a different era, whereas Bob is more of a modern type of model. So,
thanks, Joe.
So we're gonna.
I like that. You can be my agent.
So we're gonna get off in that. Agents and managers. In the beginning, there weren't many of us. Today, there are lots of them. There are lots of agents and managers. People who call themselves agents and managers. I worked for Ford all my life. Ford was, at one time, one of the biggest, or if not the biggest. And I see now there's laws being passed which sort of mimic everything that an agent or manager does, a good agent or manager. So in my personal opinion, the new laws that were passed are just old traditions that made us what we are today, made a good agency from a bad agency. So let's talk about good agencies at this point. Good agencies watch and take care, police their models and the business. If a model has a problem, they're right on top of it. Well, I can go on and on. Bob,
I'm glad, we're discussing this, because I really didn't know too much about this before. And in just trying to catch up on some of this, I have, I guess, some of the same sense that you're having. In other words, what was the necessity?
Let me ask you, why did you pick an agent, or pick that agent that you went with?
To tell you the truth, in the beginning, in my case, I picked whoever would take me, because I got refused by everybody.
All right.
Once I was in the business.
So once you were picked by an agent,
right?
Did you fully trust that agent? Do you feel that they worked for you?
In the beginning, that's what you want to think. And like establishing any sort of trust should not just be given to someone. Trust has to be earned.
Right.
So you gain by their actions and how you're treated, and if you feel good. In my particular case, as I got on in the business, I didn't see it so much as the agents. I saw things that were systemic in the business that I didn't think were equal or qualified, that I wanted to change. And that was, rather than butt my head or go to somebody to pass a law about it, I went and proposed something to
your manager,
to John as
right.
an agent, so that I could go and make those changes that I wanted to see.
You see, the natural progression is a model, a girl or a guy wants to be a model. So they have to find an agent or a manager. Now, they'll interview with a few different managers or agents. And they'll go with the one, they pick the one they want to go with. A lot of times they'll be turned down. But if an agent, say 2 or 3 of them want him or her, they have to make the choice. Now, I would make a choice, like if somebody came to me to want a model, and I wanted them, they'd have to go home and say, does Ford think the way I think? Do they have my best interest in mind? I don't really want to do editorial. Do they want me to do editorial? I want to do advertising. So there's a meeting of the minds, and as a model or as an agent, I'll only take somebody who's got the same picture as I do, wants the same things I want for them or they want from me. I mean, I'm not gonna, a model's not gonna come to me if I'm telling him or her, oh yeah, you should go to China, you know, when they don't want to go to China, you know, and they want to know, do you want me here? And if I want them, I'm going to say that. Otherwise, they've got a choice to go someplace else, and I could lose out on the model because I don't have the same ideas that they have. You know, there's a meeting of the minds, and the prospective model, when she's interviewing an agent, has to get along with everybody and feel that she likes the people that are going to be working with her. You gotta feel comfortable with
Right.
who it's representing.
I think that's really the most important thing you touch on there is, do you feel comfortable? And you know, when somebody asks me, you know, I want to go, how do I look for an agent or something? You know, you go over the points where you have to have a rapport.
Exactly. And if a girl says, Joe, I don't want to do lingerie, and you either say, can I represent her with her without doing lingerie? Or should I say, well, I think you should be doing lingerie, but I listen. And if I think she really should be, I would say, you know, what do you think about it? But if you don't want to do it, then you don't do it. You know?
Yeah, or you say, look, you could make, you know, 100,000, 200,000
doing
if you
lingerie.
did lingerie.
Yeah.
If you don't, you know, you're not going to be making that, you know, 100,000.
It's like somebody coming to you and saying, Joe, I only want to do runway. You know, of course, you're not going to take them on because you know the model's got to do it all. They've got to do it all.
Yeah,
They've got to do
that's
the catalog, they've got to do the runway, they've got to do beauty products, they've got to do the fashion, they've got to do it all in order to make a living.
Yeah, and as a good agent, as you say, you want to exploit their potential. And I say exploit in the good terms rather than a bad
promote
term.
them in the right way.
Yeah, you want to promote their potential so that their full potential as a model can be realized.
Exactly.
And that goes for sustainability, you know, not getting them overexposed. You know, these are the things that
a manager does.
Right.
A good manager.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you're not going to take a model unless you really feel they can work with you and they can work for you. You're not going to just take a model to take a model.
No.
You know, you're going to understand that, wow, I think they have a great look. I love that look. Sometimes you're wrong with the look, you know, but you say, oh man, I'd love to represent you because you've got the look that I've been looking for. But the model may say, you know, I like them, but I don't really like them. You know, I know I have a good look, but I don't want that agency. I'm going to try this other agency. I'll try this other manager agent. It's the same thing. You know, so these are what goes through your mind. And it seems now things have changed in the business. It's not like when you were a model or an agent, but you became an agent after you modeled for how long?
About 15 years, 10, 15 years.
We make the best agents, guys who were modeling for a while. But you had a longer career than I did in the business, so.
I went back afterwards, too.
Oh, and then you went back to modeling?
Yeah.
See, I stayed as an agent for at least, I think it was 40 years.
Yeah, that's long
Long run.
And that's the other thing, that if you're looking for an agent, you know, and you're looking for, and it also depends, because if you're new starting out, the person's not gonna be thinking about, oh, can they negotiate a $500,000 deal for me, or something like that. They're just looking to get started. But when people are established and they're considering going to one agency or another,
Exactly.
they're looking at, you know, your experience in negotiation. You have 40 years, you know, of experience in negotiating that type of deals and contracts, and it seems that today the negotiating power from the manager's point of view has declined, which then decreases the negotiating power for the model.
Yes. You see, the manager is the go-between. They've got to be the bad guy and the good guy. The model is always the same. And the agent becomes the bad guy because the model says, I want $1 million. And
Yeah.
you tell them, I want $1 million.
Yeah.
So you have to go and say, she wants, you know, we want $1 million. And they may want to give you 500,000. And you got to tell them.
You got to say, this is why 500,000 is not appropriate, and this is why $1 million is
And then you can go back to the model and say, you know what, you should take it for the 500,000 because that's all they have. But you always are that in between. You're either good or you're bad. Now, managers have clients, and life, why they have a certain client? Because we make their life easier. We help them with finding the right person. You know, they don't have to see 1 million people.
Yeah, they trust
They
your
know,
judgment.
they trust.
Yeah.
They trust your judgment, right? They won't send you, Bob, on a call with a guy
With Robert,
with long
somebody
hair.
looks like Robert Redford.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Or a guy with long hair. Then
Well, at least there's a guy with hair down there, right? So experience gives you the
right.
comb after you've lost your
And
hair.
A lot of these laws, Bob, I think agents have done and managers have done. I mean, they look after you. If you had a complaint about a photographer, you went to your agent and you said, oh, you know.
Well, I mean, I think there's a certain amount of, you know, when you look at the younger people coming into the business, if they're coming into the business as young people, they have no business experience.
Yeah.
Some of them haven't even been to college, so their social experience is sort of stunted. So they're totally at a disadvantage when they're coming in.
True.
And again, that's
why they have to trust the manager or the
right,
agent.
right.
You know.
And so,
But the manager or the agent always took care of them, always made sure that they weren't being abused on the set, and made sure that if they did come back and say, you know, he told me to go topless, you know, we would get on that photographer and say, hey, you can't do that, and don't do it.
right.
You know? My personal experience is you're always confronted the problem. And if it happened once or twice, you either cut the person off or you tell the model, don't go see this guy, or if you do go see him, that's what happens.
Right, but I think that, you know, not to just to sort of be devil's advocate, there's a certain amount of asymmetry of power that,
There is.
and I'm specifically more with the women than the men, that if the young girls, brand new to the business, going into a photographer's studio, and you know, and saying, you know, and the next thing you know, it's drop the towel a little lower, you know, drop the towel a little lower, why don't you just drop the towel? So the education part of that has to come from being able to educate the model before they go out to all of this stuff, that it is okay to report this stuff. And if you don't feel comfortable, you know, whatever it is, I'm not going to necessarily set these guidelines for you, but you should know that this is your business and you can set your own guidelines. And if you feel like your guidelines have been violated, then you have a safe place where you can come and report that to us, and we'll take some sort of action on it. Which, like you said, is saying, hey, you know, one more thing like this, and nobody's going to your studio anymore. Yeah.
Nobody's coming down there, and forget to call us, you know.
And that happens, you know.
Yeah, and when you talk about a position of power, I mean, the notorious guy in our business that I remember was Harvey Weinstein, who's been convicted. And my personal opinion is that, you know, if a girl wanted to see Harvey Weinstein, she knew exactly what she was getting into, because we forewarned her. We said, we don't send people to him because he's like this, you know, and expect this to happen. So we never sent anybody blind, you know, and then he had a position of power that everybody wanted to see him. Then another thing too, when it came to a model, and you said, no, I don't want you to do this, they may have wanted to do it. So they'll say, I'll go to another agency and do it. And they go to the other agency, and the other agency books them on that job. Because you turn them down and say, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to see that person. And there's another agency to take them to show them.
Yeah, well, you know, and that's what shows whether you were correct or not. And that's what builds up the trust with the, you know, whatever happened during that situation. If you explain why, you know, there are all sorts of reasons why one might not want somebody to do something. It might be they don't want them to be exposed in that market. You have a bigger and better plan for them later, and by doing this, it's going to reduce their chances of getting a bigger contract. And you have to explain that to the person, and then it's their decision whether they want to go with that, your advice, or not, or go with somebody else who says, you know, just take this.
Yeah, so we were, of course we were a business. Ford was a business, but we were like a family too. I mean, we really look after all our models. Some would come away for the weekend, some would come to dinner if they weren't having dinner in the place. So we really took care of everybody, but we all had to be on the same wavelength. We all had to want the same thing. A model would only go with Ford if we wanted to do what she needed and wanted in the business. So therefore, we were very protective of all our guys and girls. And we only did really what they wanted, and we gave them the upside and the downside. You know, look, if you turn down this photographer, you're not going to work for all these other clients that he works for. So you've got to be able to balance all that and show it to them so they could balance.
Yeah, and understand that there is no perfect world where everything works out for everybody every single time. I mean, there are going to be times when you're negotiating and you've asked, you know, and that all has to do with how much data you have on what it is that you're negotiating.
You see, so it comes back to we enforce the law and we were the law. Personally, that's what I think. A manager was, you know, in between the model and the client. And we had 8-hour days. And after 8 hours, it was time and a half. We didn't have to be told it was time. We wrote it out on a sheet, you know, 9 to 5.
Just to get that, I've heard that there are companies that are claiming that their day is 12 hours.
Yeah. I think it's all over the place. I remember we used to, a lot of clients wanted a 10-hour day. They wanted a 10-hour day because they said we had to travel And we used to charge for travel
Travel time.
You know, if you booked a 9 to 5 and you took 2 hours to get there, you were being paid a regular rate. And if you went up past the 5 o'clock, you were charged time and a half, as usual. We didn't need a law. This was a standard of the industry. There are a lot of standards in the industry that are now put in law, which to me personally, I think it just makes for more lawsuits.
Oh, Dave, I'm with you there, buddy. You know, that seems, I mean, that's, my sort of feeling is that legislation for something that exists 70 to 80 or 90, you know, more than the halfway point, always leads to more litigation. It becomes more burdensome on the businesses, and in the end result, even though the model may think that this is becoming easier for them, they'll find out that they have to be involved in litigation as opposed to being able to mediate a situation with the agent and allowing the agent to mediate with the client, which is how it's always taken place.
Right. Right.
You know, unless it's an extreme case, and then an agency will back up the model, you know.
Exactly. You see, there are parts of the new law that are fabulous. I mean, I think they're right on, and I think the law is, in a lot of places, is terrific. It spells out things that we've spelled out, but the parts that sort of come in to conflict with what the agent does is the paperwork involved.
You know, that's, I mean, look, I have a very uneducated opinion about this, honestly,
You know,
because I haven't, but just in going over it, you know, sort of briefly, that's what I'm saying, the burden that it puts on the agent, and this is already in June, the forms, everything that will have to be developed to meet this. I don't see any sort of sample, sort of, you know, any sort of way where and I'd love to, I actually invited both Sarah and the Congresswoman Reyes to participate in some of our future conversations about this, because we're not going to get through this whole thing today. And certainly they would be the ones who could really explain the purpose for some of these things.
You know, as I say, did you ever try to get a good model, female or a male, who's working a lot, to come in and sign something? Takes forever. And are you going to lose that job? Because if you have to sign off on a job before you get the job,
no, yeah, you're right. You know, you get you get the calls where they're deciding that they've whittled it down to 2 or 3 people, and you get the call and they're saying, "Look, I'm going into the meeting now. You know, we need to know now. This is our final budget meeting."
Of course, you can email, you know, but they've got to be able to sign it right then and email it back. You know, everything's got to be done. Like if a girl works 5 hours on Thursday, so I have the 5 hours booked for 5 different clients. That means I'm going to have 5 different deal memos. And she's got to sign off on every deal memo. It's going to be very tough, very hard, very tough for her to do. You know, for her to be able to get the 5 emails, because she's probably on location anyway.
Well, that's what I don't understand. Within this, would it be, within the law, like, would it be possible for the models to give you permission to do that, so that you don't have to ask them every time?
I think that's going to happen, or has to happen, because I can't see it working out without it. You know, which comes to right now, the manager has power of attorney, and with that power of attorney, they're only allowed to sign off on things for the model pertaining to her work or photography. You know, It could be fashion shows, it could be, but it's mainly to sign releases and sign checks. The original concept was I would be able to sign a release for you after I explained everything to you, what I was signing, and you had agreed, or as far as, geez, I forgot my drawer on what I was, releases and checks, because a lot of checks come in
Right, yeah, you're handling money.
in the
so,
model's
yeah.
name, and so you're allowed to endorse it, to bring it to deposit the check, and then pay her. Talking about checks and money, a lot of clients now are paying with W-2s, which means that they took out FICA, they took out Social Security, they took out
Yeah, I don't get that whole thing.
which contradicts the model being an independent contractor.
Yeah,
The model signs as an independent contractor, takes all of the own deductions, deducts
I don't
commissions.
understand how that works. How do they have that sort of
So a lot of models are complaining,
And turning jobs
or
in.
they not only turn down work with those clients, but they also sometimes are forced to form a corporation. So the corporation is paid dollar for dollar and no taxes taken out, and they have to pay their own taxes or pay their own unemployment and stuff like that.
As a model, if that's what I had to do, if that's what I would have to do to work around that, I would absolutely do that. Because first of all, that's one of the perks of the job, is being independent
contract.
and being able to pick and choose
when
what
you want to
do.
work, when you don't want to work, where you want to work, who you want to work
Right.
for.
Yeah.
And that's what a model always had. She always, or he had, that power to say, I don't want to go to California the next week to work. I want to work here in Europe. Or, Joe, I'm going on vacation. My friend just sent me a ticket. I'm going to the Bahamas. Or I'm going to go to Europe. These things are completely under the model's control. Now, you may tell a model, are you crazy? You're going to go to Europe next week when we're busy as hell here and I've got you tentatively booked the whole week? Cancel the bookings. Well, if you wanted to keep that model, you'd cancel the bookings.
Yeah.
And you'd go and call a client and he'd yell at you for 2 hours, 3 hours.
But, so this is an instance, so let's say now you cancel the booking, right? And you want the booking to stay within the agency. So now you sell them alternatives for it. Now the alternatives get it, turns out to be a great campaign.
They love it.
They love it, the person skyrockets somehow. Now,
That
are you
happens.
going to be held reliable for not, explaining to the other
Could be.
girl
Could be.
what they were missing out on properly?
Could
That
be.
it was bad advice? In other words, a bad advice was giving no advice? So, and then you're just opened up for the litigation again, where it
Yeah.
becomes the lawyer
It
party.
becomes,
Yeah.
You can't win in this situation, because now the model that went away for the week comes back, and all of a sudden she's not getting bookings from this client. Now, she can say to you, why don't you submit me anymore? You do, but the thing is,
Maybe you say, you have
who
to say they don't
replaced
want to work with you
Yeah.
because you canceled them at the last
Right.
second.
And the one who replaced you,
They love.
they love, And so, those are the ups and downs. But what this law does is makes it easier for them to litigate, for the model to sue.
But the thing is
If
that
the agent doesn't do the right thing.
but it's really not beneficial. I mean, that's my point is, and any agent, if the model has been harmed in some way, either financially or physically or whatever, is going to stand behind them with their
Exactly.
legal team and everything.
All the time.
All the way, right?
We
But-
always did.
But if it becomes just frivolous, little nitpicky
Yeah.
things, there's
You s-
no way. So, and the more you remove, which I feel legislating stuff that's already in existence does,
Right,
the
that
more
have
you,
been for years
the more
and
you
years.
remove the responsibility of the parties involved and shift the responsibility to now having to, follow this law as opposed to following one's common sense and experience in the business. I granted some things, because of the technology, the business has changed immensely. So you can't do things in the same way that you did before because of the technology.
Yeah.
And that's something else I wasn't clear about here. They're talking
About the digital.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're talking about the agent digitally changing the person's picture.
Which
But
we don't-
what if the model gives you a digitally, changed
Picture
picture?
already.
Are you supposed to be able to recognize that was,
Yeah.
oh, she took away the new scar that you had or something?
That's very, very sketchy. I mean, it's a hard law to understand, but I like the idea of it that they cannot digitally change you, on their pictures.
No, yeah, but it
You
should
know.
be that they can't
Yeah.
digitally change you. But the other thing, I didn't see any sort of compliance. In other words, there has to be, if they're going to say that, then you have to say, okay, the photographer has to keep a record of every single picture that he sent to them. And if
Right.
any of those
The original,
pictures,
he has to keep the original.
not just the original that they use, every single picture that they sent, because maybe they have one that they use, and maybe they digitally changed one that they,
Could be, but,
So,
It's look, there's a lot of good things about the law, as I said. Personally, I feel, if we define the power of attorney a little more, and it's been defined, it's great. Model managers registering with the commission, or with consumer affairs. I mean, that's no problem. I mean, licensed. The thing is, I'm sure their idea with the law was to go after the scammers, to go after the illegitimate agencies, or the agencies that came on as being legitimate, but are really rip-offs. Now, I don't want to name them, but I know the big ones, and I know they really care and watch over their clients.
and that doesn't
Over their
mean,
models.
and that doesn't mean just
Models
because
and
it-
clients.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're in the perfect world where they're
Right.
never going to have an instance, they're never going to hire somebody who makes an error or makes a mistake or does something. The thing is, how do they self-police, like you said? In a bad place, those people are going to proliferate.
They're
In
gonna
a
open
good
up anyway.
place, they're going to stand out like a sore thumb, and it's got to be you're out,
It's not gonna, this law is not gonna stop the scammers from opening up.
No,
Even
because
if
they're
they have a
closed before they
6-month
get.
run
Yeah.
or a year run, they'll be charging models for this, charging models for that. And if the law was intended to stop all the scams from happening, then it's a really great law. But by trying to do that, they've hurt really the legitimate agencies that are doing business and that have been around for a while. They really, it makes us, or makes the agents, it makes it a lot tougher for them to do business.
Yeah, there are a lot of unintended consequences that I can see coming out of this, and I'm just would be concerned is how do you get ahead of this? How do you get ahead of this? In other words, that's why I'd like to include the Congresswoman and the head of the Model Alliance, because how do you comply what's the compliance? Okay, look, we're willing to do this, but I don't see any.
Well, the only compliance I see is you gotta have a lot of different forms that models have to sign. So you gotta come up with some sort of a standard form for the model, you know, and a standard release that a model signs, so she knows exactly, and if she does give you power of attorney, you know, maybe some don't want to give you power of attorney. You
Well,
gotta explain to them how difficult it's gonna be to represent them.
Yeah, I mean, how can you, I mean, as long as you're collecting the money on their behalf, you need to have some sort of.
Power of attorney in case the check.
And you have some sort of fiduciary responsibility because you're handling their money. But I'm sure there are ways that you can, you know, if the model wants to have all of these rights, in other words, they want to codify them by saying, you know, we have to sign off on this or we don't have to sign off on this. If they want to have that, then that's their right, but they need to participate to get that done. They have to, you can't put the onus only on the agency. I mean, as a model, I used to go in and say, you know, look, I know you have the experience and I did, but on this, I'm going to disagree with you because, and the reason is, why I think I should supersede your decision is because it's, in that case, it was 90% of my business. You know, and I have to accept some responsibility for my business. And, you know, but I think what they're saying is if they're not given all the facts, they're being precluded from having that responsibility. What I'm saying is, fine. It has to be their responsibility to meet those. In other words, it has to be their responsibility to either answer the emails within a certain amount of time or just say that you can make those decisions for them.
You see, it's going to put a lot of responsibility on your working models. And you've got the fringe models who work very seldom. They're going to have all that time. The models that don't work much are going to have all that time to go over this law, to find a way to fuck everything up. And to
Oh, can we
sue
curse here? Oh, I would have been much.
Well, I've been trying to be nice to them.
Okay.
You know, usually I'll say fuck.
Well, that's, yeah, that's very
But
fundamental.
I'm trying to be nice, you know, and you know what? I got a question for you. If I sign a model to an exclusive contract, would you sign a model to a non-exclusive contract in your area? You have an office in New York City, right? Now a model comes to you and says, Bob, I don't want to sign an exclusive with you. I want to work through a lot of different agents. What would you do?
I'd say, hey, if you want to be a Target product or, you know, an IKEA product, I say go with the IKEA agency that's going to deal with that. But, you know, we sell fine furniture from, you know, Italy and France and wherever, and that's what we do. So if you feel like you're in that caliber and you want to be with us, fine.
Another thing, though, it dilutes the business also.
Yeah.
Because if a model is with 3 or 4 agents, that means that client is going to call one agency and say, I have $50 for the hour. Then the other agent's going to call and say, how about $40? I got $40. And there'll be a bidding war which will only bring the prices down. Nobody's going to come in and say,
right, that's what I see happening.
$100.
But that's what I see happening now. It's like the bidding war is in reverse. It's going down where before you used to be able to make it go up.
Well, yeah, and if they know that a model is with you, they know they have to deal with you, and they have to bargain with you, and they have to figure out what they're going to pay. And you've got the model's ear, and you say, look, I think we can get $100,000. She says, well, Joe, you know, he says, I'd like to get 150 or 125, you know. So you go back to the client and you say, I think it's worth 150, right? So the client thinks you're crazy, hangs up on you. right? So you're taking all the flack. So you gotta go back to her and say, you know, maybe we could probably get 125, 150s out of it. So you advise, it goes back and forth. But if they're with another Asian, they're bidding against themselves.
Yeah.
So
Multi-listed.
there's a lot of things that that are good in the bill and a lot of things that are not good.
Well, one thing that I saw, the way it's written, it sort of assumes that the management company is in control of a lot of things. Like they're in control of the environment that they're going to be working in. I can see being in control of the environment of the agency itself, right? And making sure that nothing takes place within that sphere of influence.
And the business relationship.
But when you go to work, the client is the one who hired the model. The client is the one who hired the photographer. The client is the one who basically hires the studio, the location band, whatever's going on. So they're more in control of that anything.
Exactly.
So how can, why even include
For
the model agency in that part?
For instance, a model shows up on a set and the guy decides to put a dog in the picture. The model calls the agent and says, I don't work with dogs.
You say, is that on
I'm
your chart?
I'm afraid of dogs.
Did we know that?
No, we didn't know it.
Well,
But
then you're
she's
working
on
with
the
that
set.
dog today,
No,
or
no.
you're paying this.
You can't, Bobby. So what happens is that you gotta call the client and say, hey, she refuses to work for a dog and you didn't say there was a dog.
Oh, they didn't say there was a dog.
No.
Yeah, that's it.
They pop things
That's
up,
it. Yeah.
you know? I forget, there was something, one of our top models went to a shoot and all of a sudden they brought in a tiger or a leopard. And she was scared shit. And she didn't want to do the shoot with it. So we had to tell her to walk off, you know? And we had to tell the client, you know, you can't do that.
No, you can't.
Pop up with a wild animal without checking to see, you know, if there's another thing, if the guy says he wants a girl who rides horses and you send a girl and they call you up and say, she never rode a horse in her life. Why'd you send me this girl? All right,
because she went on the go-see and she said, oh yeah, I ride.
Exactly.
I've done that.
But you've got to take the brunt of it, you know. So the law is throwing a lot of onus on the agency, but also throws a lot on the model, especially a busy model. Girl who or a guy who works once in a while, man, they can fill out papers for the rest of their lives. But when you got a girl who's in Jamaica one week and then comes back and goes to Europe the next week or goes up to Canada for a few days, and it's going to be tricky on how to get them to sign off on everything. That's why you need power of attorney. But that's why you need a rapport with your models. You think alike. You feel alike. You want the same things. So you understand the guy or the girl. You understand what he likes, what he doesn't like. And
But you see,
make
that's
those
what I'm saying.
decisions.
You can't
That's
legislate
what a
that
good
stuff.
manager does.
Yeah, right.
That's what a good manager does. They understand, they want the same thing for you as they want for themselves. And they work with you on that. They don't tell you to go to China when you don't want to go to China. They say, where would you want to go? Well, do you see yourself working in another market? And you guys decide.
How can I help you make that happen?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I may know an agent there. Or, Jesus, I don't know anybody there. You're going to have to, I've got to find out who you could go with or who, maybe I'll make a few phone calls. So everybody works together. Nobody, scammers do. Say you got to do this or send you down a path where they are going to strip you naked. But agencies, the credible, the big ones, the ones that have been around a long time, and a lot of them that have just started, they've all got a lot of credibility. And they all work with their guys and girls. They all work exclusively with them, so there's no problems with bidding wars, and they also have power of attorney. So they could sign off on releases and sign off on paychecks and checks. So it's, there's gotta be good agents and good managers have good models, and they agree and they think alike and they work together.
And when they disagree, they have the space to work out whatever it is.
Right.
And very rarely does it come down to a lawsuit unless
Right.
a lawyer's gotten involved and, you know.
But when you don't work a lot, you got a lot of time to figure out how to make other money. And it seems that a lot of models think about how can they sue or what could they do to make money, which has got nothing to do with their business. And they don't care about antagonizing the agent or antagonizing the client because they don't have the business anyway.
Well, that's really the unfortunate part because, as you know, reputations don't come easily. They have to be earned over a long period of time, and you have to build up a reputation. And when a lawsuit or something, some of these things can destroy your reputation, whether they actually come to fruition or not on your, you know, whether they prevail or you can prevail, and it still can be damaging to your reputation just because something's out there because you flouted or been accused of flouting some sort of particular section of the law. I mean, I do have a question that I didn't see defined in here anything, you know, because it's a labor law, right? But there was nothing that I saw defining what a model's day is.
Day
as
rate.
far as hours. No, just as far as hours.
It doesn't say whether it's 9 to 5, 8 to 9, whether it's an 8-hour day.
Yeah.
Time and a half after what?
After 8 hours.
Right. That's how we always treat it.
But if you have some company who's coming along and saying that, no, our day is 12 hours,
Well,
so it's after 12 hours.
You gotta tell the model, and she's gotta agree, or he's got to agree, that yes, I'll work for the 12 hours at this rate. You know, as long as it's up front and she signs off on it. You know, you're gonna have clients call you and say, but you know, I need 10 hours, I need 9 hours, because I've gotta travel, or I've gotta do this, or the makeup's gonna take me 2 hours. You know, and therefore I need that time, but I wanna pay the day rate. I don't wanna pay time and a half for anything over 8 hours. So you bring it to the model. You say, look, do you want to do it or don't you? If you don't, I'll tell them no, but I'll explain to them also why you should pay it, you know? I mean, it's not I'm going to throw you under the bus, you know? I'm going to be thrown under the bus, you know? So it should define an 8-hour day. We've always had an 8-hour day. We've always had time and a half of anything over an 8-hour day. And also we have a lingerie rate, which girls do it, they don't do it, they want it, it's up to them. You know, we don't hold it against them if they say, I don't do lingerie, you know? Okay.
Well, that was one of the reasons why I did that, because I refused to
You
work.
don't do lingerie?
I don't do underwear. I said, I don't see any difference between the woman standing there in their underwear
I did
and me.
underwear.
So, yeah, but did you get
But I
paid
didn't get
double?
time and a half.
No, I wanted, no, I said that's absolutely how it
But
should be.
That's what was negotiated, you know. I mean, I could have said, I'll do underwear if you give me twice my rate, but I just did it, you know, and, you know.
But that's, you see, part of that is if you have a culture, and that's what like you say, it's distributing everything over too far a ground. If you have a culture in the agency where each model is picking what their price is, you know, basically you want to be known as an agent, an agency that gets the best price for your models. So if it dilutes you to have to, you know, try and push all of that over to the model, because you also have to think of the collective as the agency, and that's not looking out against their interests, it's looking out for their overall
For their
interests.
interests, sure.
Yeah.
Well, before we sign off, first of all this is my personal opinion, and I hope it's your personal opinion.
Oh, yes. And as I said, uneducated.
You know, and we want to thank your stories. We're back again, and Nadia for putting this all together, and Mohammed, and we're happy to be here again, and I hope we're going to be able to do this as much as possible. There's one other thing that's funny. There's a lunch, about a lunch hour, or a lunch break. Have you ever walked into a studio on a day booking, and they've got a counter full of lunches?
Yeah, lunch is the
and
best part.
And it was the best part of going to the studio, was to see all this food that you could eat all day long,
Yeah.
you know? And now all of a sudden they need a 30-minute break for
Yeah,
lunch.
and you get burgers
And,
from
yeah,
Burger
what
King.
are you going to get for lunch? you know, it was the nicest thing to walk into these, when you did an ad.
And that's unlegislated. You see, but when it's
Yeah.
legislated, now you're going to get your time, but you'll get
You're
burgers
going to
from
get
Burger
potato
King.
chips and
Yeah.
burgers. And I used to think it was the best thing of a shooting, lunches. So, but thank you. Thank you for joining us. I hope we're not away so long, that we're back sooner than later. And thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please
Yeah,
send them in. Send them in to Nadia Era Stories, and we'll try to answer them. You know, and especially new models trying to get into the business. We're open to answer whatever you want to ask us. Thank you.